Today we're going to talk about the one thing that will determine whether you beat diabetes or get beaten by it. Well, as promised, we're going to talk about the one thing that will determine whether you beat diabetes or get beaten by it. But before we get to that, we're going to go down memory lane. I want to talk to you about my dad for a while, and some of you are saying, Dennis, that has nothing to do with anything. Just let me reminisce, let me talk about him for a little bit, and then we're going to tie it together, and we're going to bring forth an insight that you desperately need to gain in order to beat diabetes. But let's talk about Dad for a little bit. My dad's name was Howard Pollock, and this says Howard for a reason. This used to be his mug. It's one of my prized possessions. And so after he passed away, I took the mug and I drink coffee out of it fairly regularly, not all the time, but usually once a week or so in memory of Dad. I love my dad, and he was a great dad. I have no complaints about him. But I want to talk to him about him in terms of diabetes. And you've heard me talk about Mom a lot because Mom was diabetic. Dad never was. So you might be thinking, well, how does he even relate to diabetes? Well, just hang in there. First point I want to make is that Dad and I, in many ways, were completely different. He was a different personality than me, different body type, so many differences. Now, I say a different personality. In some ways, we weren't all that different because he was very introverted. I'm slightly introverted. In other ways, he was very different. Dad was a very conservative type. And he never liked to take any risk. He worked at the same job as long as I remember him. I know he had a few other jobs, but as long as I was growing up, I only knew Dad to have one job, and that was he worked for McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis, Missouri as an airplane inspector and had a nice job for a middle-class American. And he would inspect planes and write out squawks, as he put it, things he didn't like about the plane that had to be fixed before it could go out again. So that was Dad. His name was Howard Pollock. He has passed a long time ago. It was back in 1996, actually in June of 1996. Dad had the kind of a body that he was just slim all of his life. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He was 130 pounds and had almost no belly. Of course, you wouldn't if you weighed 130 pounds at 5 feet 7. So he had very little tummy. He was just a thin man. In fact, Dad did not like to have his picture taken because he felt he was too thin, and he never really was satisfied. He would love to have gained weight, but he just couldn't seem to do it. And a part of that had to do with the fact that Dad just didn't eat large meals, didn't have large portions of anything. He would eat anything, and he ate everything. So he never really turned anything away. I can never remember him saying, well, no, I shouldn't eat that because that might not be good for me or that's too much sugar. He'd eat just about anything, but it was always in small portions. And so as a result, he stayed small all of his life. Dad never had problems with blood pressure. My mom did. She had sky-high blood pressure, and she was taking 5 medications for blood pressure toward the latter part of her life. Dad was taking none. In fact, in his 80s, a doctor told him, you have the blood pressure of a teenager. Never had problems with blood pressure, never had a headache in his life. Sometimes one of us would be complaining about having a headache. Dad couldn't identify. He didn't know what it was to have a headache. I guess it had something to do with his low blood pressure, but he never got headaches. Never paid the slightest bit of attention to his diet. He never turned anything away. He never worried about too many carbs. He ate anything and everything. And yet he lived to be 87 years old. He passed away shortly after his 87th birthday. Now, let's talk about me. Well, I'm taller than Dad. Dad was 5'7". I'm 5'10". I weigh now about 40 pounds more than he used to. He was about 130 most of his life. And I've been as high as close to 200. I've been very close, knocking on the door of 200 pounds at 5 feet 10, which was too heavy. Never morbidly obese, I suppose, but definitely I have been on the heavy side, not so much anymore. Unlike Dad worked at the same job year after year after year. I've worked at so many jobs in ministries, and I've been at different churches. I've done all kinds of things and moved to all kinds of places and lived in different states. My life has gone completely different than the way Dad's did. Now, in some ways, like I said, very similar. We're both Christians, both love God, both Dad loved to read the Bible, I love to read the Bible. So in some ways, very similar, but I've always been willing to take chances if I felt God was leading me that way. And there have been times I've just quit my job and moved across the country. Dad told my sister Linda one time, that Dennis, he has nerves of steel. But that was just kind of the way I'm wired and the way he was wired. So we were different in that respect. I've struggled with blood pressure, and I've taken blood pressure pills for years. In fact, when I started this YouTube channel, Beat Diabetes, I was taking a blood pressure pill, and in fact, several years into it. Finally, the last couple of years, I've stopped. My blood pressure has gone down, but it's been a struggle for me. Now, what about today? Well, my blood pressure is good, as mentioned. My blood sugar is good, just like Dad's. But here's the issue. I have to work at it, and I have to make sacrifices, and I have to adjust the way I eat, and I have to do all kinds of things to get to what Dad could get to naturally without working at it at all. Dad never worked at his diet. He never turned anything away, just ate small portions and stayed slim. And I have to work at it so hard. Dad never took a blood pressure pill and lived to be 87. And if I could live that long, I would consider that a major victory. Dad was, up till about the age of 86, he was doing well. He really just got sick about the last eight months or so of his life. And that wasn't really sickness. It was probably as a result of a fall. He had some bleeding on the brain. And the doctors drained that, and then he had some more, and then everything fell apart on him. Had it not been for that fall that caused the bleeding on the brain, at least as far as we understand, he might well have lived into his 90s. At any rate, he managed to do that, lived to be 87, stayed healthy all of his life, drove a car, everything functioning pretty well, did wear a hearing aid in his last years, but did very well without even trying diet-wise. He just didn't even try. And sometimes, I think about myself. Dad had decent blood pressure, good blood pressure. I've got decent blood pressure. Don't have to take a pill. Dad didn't have any blood sugar problems. Well, I don't now in terms of my glucose levels, my A1C, my fasting. It's all fine. Doctor would tell me, Dennis, you're doing great. But Dad didn't work at it at all, and I work at it constantly. And I shove away the potatoes, and I won't eat the French fries, and I don't eat the sugary desserts. I'll have my keto desserts, but not the sugary ones. And I do all kinds of sacrifices. I don't eat rice, and there's just all kinds of things I do. And I test my blood sugar all the time, and I test my fasting blood sugar. Sometimes I'll test my post-meal blood sugar. Sometimes before I go to bed, I'll test blood sugar. Dad never did that at all. Never even thought about it. If someone had said, gone up to my dad and said, well, have you tested your blood sugar today? He'd have looked at you like you were crazy. And he'd be, why in the world would I do that? And we all have somebody that we can relate to, kind of like I can relate to Dad this way. We all know somebody who doesn't eat very well, eats the standard diet, eats junk, stays slim, and is healthy, and lives into their 80s without seemingly having to try at all. And here we are struggling, and we're giving up the potatoes, giving up the rice, giving up the pasta, giving up the breakfast cereal, and making these sacrifices, cutting our carbs down to 20, 30, 40 grams per day, doing all these things just to get to the level where somebody else is automatically there without trying. And we think, man, that is just not fair. But here's the reality. Life isn't fair. There's all kinds of ways that we're born that are different from others, and some are superior to others, and some are inferior. And so one person may be born handsome, and the other person born ugly. Or one girl may be born beautiful, and the other ugly. And they didn't ask for that. They didn't try. They may wear a little makeup, but they don't have to try. Benedicta is beautiful whether she tries or not. Whether she thinks she has to wear makeup before coming on camera, but the honest truth is she's beautiful any which way you look at it. And she never worked at it. She never had to take beauty lessons. She just is. And some of us are much more plain looking, but that's just the way it is. Some people are athletic. Some are clumsy. Some people are smart. Others are not very bright. Life just is that way. And the one thing that's going to determine whether you beat diabetes or not is this. You're going to have to deal with the hand you've been given. You can't just look at someone like my dad and say, well, it's just not right, and moan and groan and cry around because you've got to watch your blood sugar and they don't, and you've got to test your blood sugar and they don't, and you've got to give up the potatoes and the rice and the breakfast cereal and the pasta and they don't, and you're having your little keto dessert and they just go to the store and buy a bunch of cinnamon rolls and all kinds of sugary desserts, and you can't touch those. Or you go to a party, or you go to a church potluck dinner. And about half the stuff you have to say no, not because you wouldn't like to eat it, but because you cannot eat it and keep your glucose normal. And you could easily say, well, that's just not right. It's not fair. What's going on? The answer is you deal with the hand you've been given. You make the necessary adjustments. So when you find out, as many of you have, that the doctor tells you you are diabetic, your glucose is way too high, and this is going to be a real problem for you, there's a point where you have to say, so what? I will make the necessary adjustments. And guess what? That's what this channel is all about. I say it in a dozen different ways. I do interviews with people that have beat diabetes, and I give lectures, and Benedict and I have done a few skits, and we do all kinds of things, but basically saying the same things. Adapt, adjust, deal with the fact that you have a tendency toward diabetes. I don't personally see diabetes as a disease. It's just a tendency that your metabolic system tends to fall apart. I was born with a body different from my dad's. My dad was slim all over, stayed slim all of his life. My mom, who was the one that became diabetic and took 5 medications for blood pressure, she had a tummy on her. And I have been that way all my life. If I weighed 300 pounds, I'd still have skinny arms and skinny legs and a big old whopping belly. That's just the way I am. I didn't ask for that. I didn't work at it. I remember when I was a teenager, around 16 years of age, I was skinny. I was just a skinny kid, and I was tired of being skinny. So I said, I'm going to go on my own program to gain weight, and I did. And sometimes after supper, a couple hours after my dinner meal, I would eat 3 pieces of bread and smear peanut butter all over each piece because I knew there was a lot of calories. Or I would have Mom make me a big old bowl of ice cream. I'd put chocolate syrup on it, put coconut on it, put nuts on it, and just indulge. So I did everything I could to gain weight. And guess what? I gained weight. I sure did. But it didn't go to my arms and it didn't go to my legs. It went to my stomach. So I was still a skinny guy pretty much in the face, definitely in the arms and legs, but a big old belly. And it was like, that's not working. That's when I started doing push-ups and lifting weights to kind of even things out. It helped a bit. But that's just the way I was born. That is the perfect body type for diabetes. And if that's you, you've got it. You've got the perfect body type. You may not have diabetes yet, but you've got what it takes. Dad was not that way. He was just slim all over. Some people, if they gain weight, their arms gain weight, their legs gain weight, their bottom gains weight. It's just evenly distributed. That's perfect. That's good. But if you gain weight and it all runs to your belly, that's not good. Anyway, the key is the adjustment. You can't be like everybody else. You can't eat like everybody else. You have to test your blood sugar. And maybe your cousin Billy Bob never had to and never will have to. That's okay. You deal with things as they are. You make the necessary adjustments. That's what this YouTube channel is all about. It's showing you, A, you have to make some adjustments, and B, here's exactly what they are. You cut your carbs way down. You employ time-restricted eating. Narrow your window of eating for each day to about 6 or 8 hours. You make those adjustments. You test your blood sugar. You eliminate the foods that make it spike. So you have to do a lot of stuff that Cousin Billy Bob doesn't have to do, or my dad didn't have to do, or maybe your Aunt Margaret doesn't have to do. That's okay. That's how life is. And if you'll make those adjustments, there's a good chance you could live as old as Cousin Billy Bob, maybe older than Cousin Billy Bob. Who knows? Maybe I'll live longer than my dad. Maybe I won't. Only God knows that. But you do what you have to do. You make the sacrifices, you make the adjustments, and guess what? You find out it really works. It really works. This isn't so bad after all. And of course, today is the perfect day to be making those adjustments because there are so many recipes, so many foods, so many keto desserts you can eat and enjoy. It's really not all that bad. So, my friend, to you who have just found out you're diabetic and you're depressed, you're nervous, you're scared, and you're a little bit angry because it just hardly seems fair, get over it, deal with it, make the adjustments, and live a long, healthy, happy, prosperous, blessed life. Amen. I want to encourage you to join Benedict and me in our home through our new podcast, Discover the Word with Den and Ben. While you drive in your car or while you walk or exercise at the gym, you can be learning the Bible through our low-key, user-friendly Bible studies. To get the information you need to listen to our Discover the Word with Den and Ben podcast, click on the link in the description.